Welcome to A Parent's Guide to Child Development. I'm your host, Anna Marie Von Furley from Fledgling's Flight. Each podcast, we strive to give parents the tools they need to help their child thrive through conversations with experts in child development and psychology, where you can learn about the most important information that you didn't know existed. We've all heard about workplace burnout, but what about parental burnout? Most people don't realize that parenting can push your nervous system to the brink, especially when raising neurodivergent children. Today, we're diving into this overlooked but all too common experience with Vanessa Fox, a neurodivergent pediatric occupational therapist and parent coach. With over 15 years of experience and her own personal journey recovering from burnout, Vanessa brings a compassionate, trauma-informed approach to help parents shift from constant reactivity to confident, connected caregiving. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yay! Well, let's start by defining terms. How do you define parental burnout, and how is it different from general exhaustion or stress?
Yeah, that's a good distinction to make beginning this conversation. So I explain to people that parental burnout or any form of burnout really is usually more chronic and more consistent than regular stress or overwhelm. You can often feel like there's little to no relief from traditional strategies that are mentioned. So, taking more nuanced approaches and knowing somebody that has experience, either professionally or personally, with burnout is really much more of a softer and useful approach for those people experiencing burnout.
Yeah, it's what's really interesting is that when we originally had met to discuss, what kind of topic we wanted to talk about, and you had mentioned burnout, it was one of those things that everybody has heard about workplace burnout. Like everybody knows about it, but absolutely nobody associates it with parenting. And I just think that, I mean, that was one of those aha moments, and why I was, really excited to have you as a guest, because if you don't have words to explain what you're feeling, then you have no tools to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. I think really continued distinction upon naming it, right? You're calling it burnout. It's something more than stress and more than overwhelm, is knowing that what's not working, right? You can't outthink it, you can't push past it, and then it becomes internalized to think, or the person becomes like starting to think that they're a failure because I can't get past this stress. That is a huge red flag for, oh gosh, this may actually be burnout. So that's a signal to the parent or the person experiencing that burnout that, yeah, this might be something that I need to try a different approach for. Yeah.
Yeah. And in your work, how often do you see burnout tied directly to a parent's dysregulated nervous system rather than just their circumstances?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like when I start the interview process with new parents, I don't always know within our first conversation, but sometimes I will hear how their child is experiencing stress and the sensory input of the world and realize, oh gosh, I think that this might be more than let me help your child. It might be a let me help you as well too. This is how your nervous system might be perceiving that. It's really hard to quantify uh, how many parents are in that burnout stage, but I would say anywhere from like a quarter to 50% of the parents that I work with really are in true burnout of some form. And it's, happening at all different phases. So they might be initially hitting it, or they might have been in it for a while. And burnout can last a lot longer than people realize. So having tools to help with that is super helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I think for all parenting is a challenge, and I have one child, and I can't imagine. I meet people all the time that have more than one. I'm like, I don't even know how you do it. But I feel that even though all parenting is challenging, and you can feel overwhelmed and even burnt out with typically developing children, with neurodivergent children, I feel like it's like taking it up to 11, and so there's this level of stress that is sort of at a high pitch all the time that you adapt to over time, but at some point it gets to a point where you it's debilitating, right, where
Yeah.
you just can't
Yeah.
even function anymore.
You're truly hitting something like the nail on the head right now, because it's society has expectations. And once you're neurodivergent, if you're not meeting society's expectations, that burnout can hit a lot faster and last a lot longer, because not all support systems, most support systems within society don't have that ability to say, hey, we're here for you, we understand you. And so those expectations and society don't always match together. And that's when burnout lasts a lot longer. So, yes, it is much harder for those neurodivergent families. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mentioned in my last question about dysregulation, and now that I'm thinking about it, maybe there are people out there that don't understand what dysregulation is. So do you mind
Mhm.
defining that?
Yeah, so dysregulation is that state of stress, and it's from the nervous system. So it's I'm not at my optimal functioning, and this is how I can usually notice myself in optimal functioning. And if I'm not there, how can I get back there? And it's not always I have to stay at this level of functioning. It's knowing that I'm going to go sort of in a roller coaster, and that I'm always trying to get back to the middle, but it's okay that I'm not in the middle. When I'm not in that middle of that regulation baseline, how can I support myself when I'm up here and like hypersensitive, and how can I support myself when I'm down below that line as well too? So how can I regulate?
Yeah, I always think of like dysregulation as sort of like accessing that lizard brain, where there's like logic isn't even coming in as inputs, and there's kind of a flight or freeze kind of reaction to it, and so when your child is dysregulated, or even if yourself is dysregulated, logic and talking oftentimes is harder for them to process because they're in this state of a more primitive state
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
the brain functionality, right? So when you talk about identifying your system state, how can a parent tell the difference between like being in a flight, or freeze in the middle of daily chaos?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that fight, flight, or freeze response, I guess to give you a more specific picture of what that looks like, let's go through like a common experience that a lot of parents have. It could be asking their kid to end something that was fun, or to leave a fun place, or to get in the car. Those transitions are really hard. So if a kiddo is in, let's say, freeze mode, they are the kid that's going to look down, totally ignore. They are not maybe even talking at all. So if they are a speaking individual, they are just going to shut down. When the parent says, hey, it's time to end your favorite activity, and the kiddo is in flight mode, they might run away, they might walk away and slam doors. That this is a not as common experience to that response, but sometimes you'll see that kid get extra giggly or talk or say just one more minute, because they need to end it on their terms. That's the kiddo
Mhm.
that's in flight in that mode. The kiddo that is in the fight mode, that one is really obvious to a lot of people, right? That's the I'm gonna throw something, I'm gonna say something might hurt you with, or I might scream or yell or something like that. That looks more like a fighting response, in response to the parent saying, hey, it's time to go. But that request to the child when they're in fight, flight, or fight, they feel like it's a bear attacking them. That is how their nervous system perceives that request. So knowing that, okay, this was ending their entire world of fun, and they're perceiving it like that, how can I minimize that response, would be something that I would work on parents with if they are having those flight,
Mm.
flight, and fight responses.
Thank you. Why is it important for parents to lower their own demands first before trying to support a dysregulated child?
So, one of the biggest reasons why a parent would want to lower their own demands is because the child can sense that push, that I need to change something from the parent's nervous system, especially when they're neurodivergent. Um, when they can lower the demands, it's lowering that perceived threat from the child. So the child isn't necessarily looking at it like, oh, there's a bear attacking me because you asked me to end this activity. It is helping the child find safety within their nervous system when the parent can do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. You emphasize creating space and even suggesting doing nothing that can feel counterintuitive to many parents. Why is doing nothing sometimes the best next step?
Yeah, I love that one. Uh, Doing nothing is something I describe as an external experience. It's going to look like the parent is taking no action to change the so called behavior that they're seeing from their child. But internally, it's a different experience for the parent. It's the if you're feeling activated, or another word would be triggered by your child's emotions, which are challenging for adults as well as the kid, it's internally kind of soothing that state. Like, what is this bringing up for me right now while your child is feeling that, so that you don't have to create the agenda of changing the child's emotion, but you can actually start to say, how can I support this? And that really helps that process.
Hmm. 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 In your toolkit, which you generously offer to people on your website, you recommend that sensory safety is a starting point. What are some easy sensory safety tools that parents can access in the heat of the moment?
Yeah, those are really helpful, and they're not actual things, right? It's what we do with our body language as adults. I would say the biggest one that I use in my practice and that I teach to parents and hear feedback on, this was life changing for us, is lowering your eye level to their eye level or lower. When I have a kiddo who's in freeze mode and they are really just shut down, not talking a whole lot, maybe they're like slumped over and sitting down on the floor, I am getting down and sitting on the floor with them. I sometimes have laid myself on the ground to get my eye level lower than their eye level as well too. And parents, when they're using these strategies in that moment, if you're out in public, it's a different situation. I get that. But if you can lower your eye level to theirs, it tells their nervous system, hey, this is a sense of safety for you. And I'm not standing over you and telling you to calm down or trying to get you to calm down while you're feeling threatened. So that body language really tells their nervous system you're safe. Another tool that I teach parents is to connect without talking. So just if you can stop any form of conversation or like verbal request, that's really going to help the child's nervous system to find that sense of safety as well. So if you know that your child needs a drink of water to regulate, to find that baseline of safety again, you're just simply, offering that glass of water or that water bottle to them without saying anything, just as a suggestion, here's a safety net for you.
Would that also work for like some kind of an item like a teddy bear or something that they self-soothe with,
Oh, yeah.
as opposed
Yeah.
to a glass of water?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they have something soft, if they have a preferred toy that they love, I often see kids holding things in their hand that are so beloved and they don't want to let go of them. Those toys, if they don't have something like that in the moment and the parent can offer it to them, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Can you walk us through the regulation reset? What does that actually look like in a messy real life moment with an overwhelmed child?
Yeah. I really like to simplify things for parents. The regulation reset is a little bit about what we've been discussing in more simplified steps. So that first step is that do nothing. It is the let me internally check in with myself and see how I'm feeling so that I can soothe myself and my child can also feel some sort of regulated moment, right? Or get back to that somewhat closer baseline so something can get done. Um, I'll walk you through a specific example after we go through the 3 steps so that feels more like real life, I guess. First step is that sensory safety. The second step is finding your anchor within yourself. And that really is part of that internal, okay, what do I need to do for myself? Some parents need to just count to 10 before they start speaking because that gets really hard when you're activated as the adult to self soothe and to just keep it together for your kid. Then the last one is sensory safety. So we want to make sure that the child has something that is making them feel safe, whether it's that lowering my eye level to them. It might be something like giving them their preferred toy, that stuffy, that water bottle. It might be just a hand on the shoulder. Some kids don't like to be touched, so it might just be a "I'm here for you," so that the child feels validated in, okay, I know this moment is challenging right now, but that offering of support, "I'm here for you when you need me," that's really helpful to bring that sensory safety to.
Yeah, what I was thinking when you were talking about that anchoring and that finding that place of self-soothing for the parent, I was it flashed in my head those movies that when you get onto the flight and they tell you to put on your own oxygen mask before like assisting somebody else because you can't help other people if you're oxygen deprived. So like if so that's what an analogy that came to me when you were saying that. Like put on your own oxygen mask first before you help your child get their oxygen mask on.
And I love that analogy. However, when we're triggered by our own kids' fight or flight, that thing is so hard to remember, right? It's like, I just want to change this because it feels so uncomfortable. So that's why I really like that. Let's find our anchor. Just that image of, okay, whether it is you're imagining that oxygen mask, whether you're imagining that anchor, whether you're imagining that thing that just self-soothes you, that's huge to be able to tap into yourself first, because we're always thinking about how can I help my kid, and sometimes helping your child in that moment is really helping yourself first. So yeah.
Yeah. So in your toolkit, why do you say that the goal isn't calm, but instead feeling safe enough? Like how does that reframe help reduce burnout for parents?
Yeah, so the pressure of calm can be another form of fixing it, of changing it. And calm is not always the goal, because when that becomes our goalpost, it feels unattainable, especially when parents are in burnout and they've been in burnout for so long. Calm is no longer your baseline. It is, um, I like to use the word regulated. It is, how can I get into that front part of my brain so that I can think more clearly, rather than thinking with that animal reptilian part of our brain that gets me just super overwhelmed. So that's a key that I would feel like is really helpful for that step.
Awesome. So you mentioned that logic doesn't work when someone is in fight, flight, or freeze. Why is that, and what should a parent do instead when they're stuck in that mode?
So that logic is tapping into a brain that is just not on right now. It's tapping into that part of the brain that's not on. So when the child is really emotional, they cannot think through things clearly. So when a parent says, go get your shoes on when the kid is crying, or stop crying, that kid can't logic through that, because that front part of their brain where they can plan and think through things is not something they have access to. When the parent can speak to them in the part of the brain that they're in, that's what helps bridge that to the front of the brain to say, hey, we can start using logic now. But until that safety is felt, then they can't get to that thinking part of their brain. They can get out of their emotional brain when it's met from the parent.
Fabulous. Many parents feel ashamed of their own dysregulation. What would you say to someone who feels like they're failing their child when they're not calm themselves?
That one's tricky. Adults have many years of, you shouldn't feel this way, right? So I would challenge the parent to say, whose voice or what part of you experienced that at a different part of your life, because that might be the pressure to change how you know you're feeling your own emotions and how your child is also feeling their emotions. So really figuring that piece of it out for them is something I challenge them to. When did you feel this way earlier in your life?
Right. How can carrying small grounding objects like a baby blanket intentionally help a parent during the day?
So this goes back to the original part of when we were talking, that piece of the conversation when I was saying you can't outthink the emotions when you're in burnout. You can't put push past it and use the traditional talk therapy to again, like, work your way out of that intense emotion, because you're using logic, you're going to the front of the brain that is not on right now. The most like beep beep, like, biggest alarm that's going on is in the emotional brain, and they've got to we have to tap into something sensory based or movement based, because it brings us back into our body. So, something that really connects to you, that says, hey, this is something that soothes me, that makes me feel better. It might be something soft, it could be a rock, it could be a baby blanket, it could be something that you're wearing, right? Something that you just tune into a little bit more. Maybe you're touching the shirt on your fabric, or the fabric on your shirt that you really like, and just grounding yourself in that sensation more than trying to say, hey, I'm just going to stop feeling this way, because it doesn't work like that when you're in burnout.
Hmm. Interesting. It also makes me sort of think of like when people are playing with their jewelry, or spend their rings or something like that. That is that kind of thing too.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So, what role does co-regulation play in preventing or healing parental burnout?
Co regulation is really challenging to bring about with two dysregulated nervous systems. So, that co regulation in parenting is, again, going back to the analogy that you were talking about earlier, putting your oxygen mask on first. It's really about, okay, how can I figure out ways to soothe my own nervous system so that I can model it for my kid to learn. But then, so when I learn more about myself, I can also teach my kid. And when we're going through burnout, it can be really hard to find those tools. So, again, going back to the sensory items of what do I like in my sensory environment and what can I change to help support me through that. And then perhaps if I can figure that out about myself, I can also support my child through that. And that's
Mm.
really where co-regulation helps a lot as a parent.
Thank you for that. You provide different strategies like compression, rhythm, and breath work for different emotional states. How can a parent figure out which of these to use in the moment?
Okay. So, one of my biggest tips is figuring out what interoceptive cues that your body um, feels more soothed with.
Yeah.
Um, the interoceptive cues are internally, my body is feeling this sensation. And if I notice when I use compression meaning I'm pushing up against the table when I'm talking to my kid just to ground myself more.
Mm.
Compression can be for kids, sometimes it's an embrace, a hug. And that makes me feel a little bit calmer. Some people don't like touch, so they're going to rely on something else. Maybe they can tune into their breath. Not even just saying take a deep breath, but more so the sensory aspect of it. What does it feel like when the air is going through your nose? Is it a cold sensation? Is it a hot sensation? And paying attention to more of the subtle details when they are stressed out is super helpful to just kind of ground yourself back in the body. And experimenting with those is the biggest way that I teach kids, but also parents. So we'll do something outside of the heat of the moment, of the intensity of the emotion. So we'll call them movement or sensory experiments, and we'll figure out, okay, how is my body responding to ice? Did I like that? Did I not like that? And we'll talk about what our heart is doing. We'll talk about what our lungs are doing, if we're sweating, if we got cold. And so we talk about those sensations internally. We just have a conversation about it so that we can know, okay, this is something that my body gravitated towards and I felt better afterwards, or this is something that my body is pulling away from and I don't want to repeat that again. So, knowing that outside of the intensity of the emotion is super helpful. And it's not just for the kids, it's for the parents too.
Well, it seems like it does two different things. One is it like takes the focus away from whatever it is that they're made them dysregulated and makes them focus on. what am I feeling sensory wise, as far as like the air coming through my nose, or touching ice or something like that. But also it builds an awareness of their reaction, like their what's happening inside their body when they're in this state, and gives them the tools to identify what can help uh, get them back into a state of regulation by doing it repeatedly, not one time, right? So, like building in that habit of sort of like paying, like, okay, I'm dysregulated now. What was, now I'm thinking about these other things, and now I've got some tools that can help me calm myself down.
Yes, and touching on that a little bit further, it's giving language for the internal sensations that we might be aware of, but because we don't understand them, they produce anxiety. So once you can give a label for it, and it's a neutral label, like my heart is going fast, my heart is going slow, you can kind of get out of your mind a little bit more and label it automatically as something changed in my body and I've got to go into panic mode. Whereas if you have a language for it that's neutral, you're not panicking because of an internal sensation. And then because you're doing it outside of the intensity of the emotion, you're also getting the experience of having access to the logic part of your brain when you are more emotional, when that part of your brain is harder to tap into, when you're practicing that language of what's happening inside of my body outside of the intensity of the moment. You're making that bridge again from the emotional brain to the logic brain, which is a huge part of why that becomes a little bit easier to figure out when I'm in that intensity of that emotion. What can I do for myself? What's the right tool for me? And it's going to change, is the honest answer. It's not always the same, and figuring out what works for your body is really the key to success and getting out of burnout.
Yeah, awesome. So, when a parent's already burned out and everything feels like one more thing, what are your suggestions for parents who want to build regulation practices but feel like they have no capacity left?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. It's hard to take that first step to say, I'm going to try this, even though everything else I've tried is not working. I feel like having the support system to say, I've been there, I've done that. This can really help, and I truly get what you're going through. That is a huge factor in taking that first step of saying, I'm going to try this. Also, recognizing that the strategy to maybe constantly talk and research about it, it's not going to get you out of the woods of burnout. Knowing that when you find a strategy that is based in sensory or based in movement, sometimes lately what's been trendy is calling it somatic work or somatic healing, those types of words or approaches, those are going to be what really helps the parent or anybody really experiencing burnout get out of it and take that first step. Those would be great things to look for.
Awesome. You've been through burnout yourself. So, how did that shape what's inside your burnout proof parenting guide and the way you support parents now?
I am going to be honest, it's really hard to create a cookie cutter approach for burnout because I want to say, hey, these are the tools, but what works for some people doesn't work for everybody. So I really tried to be mindful of knowing that uh, the talking piece of let's talk about our burnout, it only gets you so far. And really helping people realize that the strategies that are going to get you out of burnout are based in two big things: sensory and movement. And even a third one I'm going to add in is community, right? So when we can blend those three components, however that feels best to the person experiencing burnout, that's really what I tried to put into that parent burnout proof guide, and being able to co-regulate with your child so that you can use, a general group of tools, but then figure out what works best for your body. It's just a starting point. It's a launching pad to say, hey, this is available to you. And I know these aren't going to be exactly what you need, but this is something to kind of step into and dip your toes into to see, hey, this might actually be something that works.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what an amazing gift for people that you've created. What's one small shift that parents listening today could try now to shift from lost and exhausted to more confident and connected?
So I was in conversation with a dad a few weeks ago, and he was looking for strategies to uh, just feel more regulated in the moment. And I asked him the question. I said, what is something that you have done in your past outside of your parent role that made you feel alive, that made you forget sense of time, or that made you feel like you? And so he had to think about that. And I don't know if I should be sharing this answer. And I think it's relatable, but this dad's answer was music. He would sing and make songs for his friends, and they would be humorous. And it really was something that connected him with other people and just made him feel alive. And I said, how can you incorporate that into your parenting journey so that you feel that piece of you again, whether it's sharing some of those moments with your kids, some of those memories with your kids. Maybe it's doing it on your own time, but figuring out that piece of you outside of your parent role. What was that? Even just thinking about it plants a seed in your brain to say, hey, this is possible again. It doesn't mean you have to take an action, but thinking about what makes you feel like you, and no guilt, no shame, not going there, just thinking about what that piece of you is. That would be something that I would tap into to say, hey, I remember when I was regulated and I can do this again, or this is how I could use it in my role now to make me feel a little bit more empowered and a little bit more confident in this can actually change for me. This can change for us.
Yeah, that makes me think like from a mother's perspective, I feel like I know you brought up a story about a father, but for me, I hear a lot about this, and I felt this myself as a mother, is that once you have a baby, then that is who you are. You're the mom, and you kind of all other identities, no matter what you are, you could be like a Nobel Prize winning author, and yet you are now just this. And then it's the hardest part because you go into this identity crisis of like getting like losing yourself by having children. And I think that's a really important thing for everyone to take away, is that finding that thing that made you feel you, that made you sort of different from other people. For me, like was a flying trapeze artist, and so like that was my happy place where I would go and feel myself, because outside of that I just felt like, who am I now that I've had a
Yeah,
child, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. That's beautiful. That is more unique than the example that I gave. So now I'm like, huh, how would you, because it's not like, well, maybe you have trapeze bars in your house, but how would you tap into that to add more of you back into your regulation piece? I'm thinking about it, and I have some families. I even have a mom that got her kids involved in ninja obstacle competitions, the ninja obstacle course competitions. And she decided, oh my gosh, my kids are enjoying this. I am such an active person. I need to be doing this too. So she really has set up obstacle courses within their home, which is so cool. But it's truly helped her regulate as well too, which is, I mean, a huge piece of, oh, I don't just have to do this for my kids. I can do it for myself too. So I love that you even brought that example up, but I'm also thinking for you, like, what does that really look like, right?
Yeah, and so and unfortunately, I did try to bring my son to trapeze when he was like 2. He was a he climbed it like, and we got him into the net, and then And then we tried to get him to go up onto the trapeze to try, and he's like, I'm too big for that. I'm like, okay.
Oh,
But,
fun.
he also has like a fear of heights, which I actually had a very acute fear of heights when I started trapeze, and it was debilitating, and I just needed to get past it because I knew it was irrational, and it didn't solve itself in a day, but over 25 years of doing it, that it's definitely desensitized me to heights. So I didn't want to push him at all because at his age, you couldn't have gotten me up on a trapeze bar either, right? So it
No.
wasn't until I was 29 that I was like in a place that I felt like I was going to challenge myself. So
Okay, but that just kind of reminds me too of that regulation piece of that fight or flight part of our brain, right?
yeah.
It's like, oh, it took me that long to realize that. Let's have some grace for our kids with their big emotions too. Truly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you about an important topic that is going to help so many parents. So, how can parents get a hold of you?
So parents can find me at Vanessa Fox OT on Instagram, or they can find me at DEN, which stands for Develop, Educate, Nurture, also on Instagram. We're on Facebook as well too. Or you can go to our website, developeducatenurture.com, and find the Burnout Proof Parent Guide, how to co-regulate with your child without burning out. And you can find a lot of other free resources too by signing up for the free trial and be a part of our parenting community to problem solve any emotional regulation struggles that you or your child have and feel supported within a community that really gets you.
Fantastic. And people can DM you if they have any questions, right?
Oh, of course. Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. I've so enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Me too. Bye.
Yay. Thanks for tuning into A Parent's Guide to Child Development, where we decode milestones, demystify meltdowns, and occasionally question whether goldfish crackers count as a food group. Spoiler, they do. Make sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an expert tip, breakthrough strategy, or aha moment that can make a big difference in your child's development. It's cheaper than therapy and less messy than glitter slime. We'll be back soon with more expert advice, real talk, and zero judgment. Until then, keep calm and try not to step on any Legos.